Good evening, folks. Here we are again. Second time. Last night we began reading a little from Lyndon Batisse's production here called Jewels of the Caribbean. It's a Potbreak production and it was done in 2014. We had 15 authors' work collected here, and the effort was ready to try and project their work.
But it was much more people.
Of course. What had happened
but
is that
the best 15.
yes, we were able to just compile 15 of the best, you could say, and the others, mind you, that did not make this book, they were excellent. So we had a real rough time trying to select the 15 that got into this book. My idea is, of course, with Lyndon's permission, to start reading little stories as we go along, especially at night. I want to make it a regular feature. And I do have here a good listener in Lulu, Mama Lulu.
Mama Lulu.
She's likely to fall asleep again.
Put me the song in the chair this time so I won't sleep.
Yes, put her the song so I can tap her on her forehead if she falls asleep. Pretty close to me then. So the idea is that we want to cultivate a little reading as we go along, a little reading session. Perhaps not every night, because people do get tired with this kind of thing, but if we could do it and we could inspire, even in your own home circle, a little reading for your kids, something we recommend that your children read aloud and they work with a dictionary nearby so that they could learn a couple new words every day. It doesn't have to be heavy material like this, of course. There are pretty good children's books out there. But this was an attempt here to produce something that was about totally West Indian flavor. And I think it was a really good effort. The books can be purchased at $80 for one, right? A copy. But I was suggesting a while ago to Lyndon that maybe it's kind of late now because it's November, December, but sometime in January 2024, maybe we could have, a collection of folks. Let's say you have 10 people come home here, or we do it in Cora, and there will be no charge to it. But if you have written things, you could also come to it. I would suggest that since we're not charging, you just appear with your material. But it would be nice if 10 guarantee that they will be there, you would have what you call like how we used to have a Dutch party long ago. Things could be brought, little refreshments, not major meals, just little refreshments. And
so you will be inviting other people as well to hear?
Well, I would say rather than invite, it's open to who might want to come. And if they've begun to read or to write their own stuff, they could come forward and we'll have an evening of, a literary evening, so to speak. I remember when Potbreak produced something called Circle of Poets, right? Circle of Poets. There was a gathering here in our garage, and these poets came and they read some of their work, and perhaps some read that material that wasn't even printed then. But it was a wonderful evening, and I don't see any reason why. I remember also at Hotel Normandy, there used to be a reading. Did they call it Under the Greens or On the Greens? I think it was Under the Greens.
I'm not too sure, but it was where dinner and a play.
Yes, dinner and a play. But in this case here, we are not going to have dinner on a major scale. We are not going to have any plays, but we will certainly encourage your, the same way that people got into this book with their work. It can be, you can air your talent, so to speak. Anyway, that is just a suggestion. Maybe you could respond to this, whether you would like to, sometime in January, we could plan it for then. that month, and you come, you bring your material, you walk with some refreshments that can be shared amongst. I will target 10 as a good reasonable number. 10 persons coming as a reasonable number. 1 minute, please. Huh? Hello, good evening. Mm-hmm. Lyndon, give me 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Right? No problem. Thanks a lot. I was just throwing all that thing. Right. Lyndon would like you to call him in 10 minutes, right? So we have a little 10 minutes to do this stuff here. So, my friends, I think, I think it might be a good idea. It'll give us a chance to see more talent displayed. So anyway, I want to continue reading that second part of the running night story. The author happens to be Jason Dukaran, and we have here a profile of the authors who appear in this, the stories appear in this book here. But all it says of Jason Dukaran is he is a Caribbean author specializing in the region's weird and uncanny. Weird and uncanny.
It's like
Now
an uncanny story, really.
Right. It's typical of the West Indian uncanny, right? And this book was printed in 2014. So where did I reach? How old are you, Oldman asked. Too old to be standing around bumping my gum on a running night with an out-of-towner, Joan said. Take my advice. Buckle your place up and leave. Drive. Don't look back. I'm not an out-of-towner, Oldman insisted vehemently. What's so bad anyway? Joan shook his head and left, walking with a purposeful pace. Oldman watched him hop into an old car and drive along the road leading out of Maria Roja. Oldman wasn't sad to see him go. His information wasn't worth the time he had spent shooting the breeze with the old-timer. He sucked his teeth in annoyance and hopped behind the wheel of his van, making the long drive back up to his cabin on the cusp of the bay. Maria Roja was a small town on the coast, with a population that existed mainly on fishing. The town was friendly and even strangers were welcomed in this idyllic getaway. Usually the houses would have their front doors open, only to close after the sun had gone down, but today was different and unnerving. Every house on his route back to the cabin had been abandoned. Along the windows, boards were placed and cross-battened. Doorways were sealed with foam or plastic or wood, anything the residents could get their hands on. Every entrance was closed off. He turned on the radio, his paranoia rising. Maybe there was a storm watching effect. This was a tropical island. Maybe it was something to that effect that he had been unaware of, since he was stuck up on the hill in his isolated cabin. He flicked from station to station and settled on one that was giving him a news update. There was no mention of a storm. Oldman licked his lips. A few hours later, he still had power and running water. No hurricane or storm warnings had come over the radio. The sun had disappeared and the sky took on an odd purplish hue. The sea breeze drifting in from the bay seemed to be saltier, leaving an acrid, unpleasant taste in his mouth when he opened it. Far out at sea, lightning struck again, forking down to meet the water. Seconds later, thunder rolled. As a precaution, he had nailed an old bit of plywood he found in the shed. It wasn't much, but whatever the people were protecting against in town, he supposed he should at least present a token resistance. You sleeping? Okay. He managed to cover 2 of the 3 windows, leaving the one facing the sea open so he could admire the storm's handiwork. The storm rolled up suddenly, the salty scent of the air taking on a foreboding tinge. The lightning flashed close to shore, and an explosion of thunder followed, lingering for a few seconds like an unwelcome pest before the rain began to patter down. The moon was just above the horizon, hanging like a luminescent medallion. Alderman looked at the shimmering orb and concluded that the old geezer was probably right. The whole thing seemed to be coated in a tinge of red. Back when he lived inland, the pollution from the industrial estates gave the moon some funny shades. But Maria Roja was too far away from the smokestacks for them to cast their shade over the moon. A feeble light danced off the raindrops as they pattered down, falling hard on the aluminium roof and running off. Allman listened to the streams of water fall from the guttering, which were far too small to handle this sort of torrential downpour. Ever so often, the sea near the edge of the bay was thrown into sharp relief by lightning, streaming down like a forked tongue from the heavens. The sea had turned savage, and Allman could see the splash from the crashing waves rising higher with each successive crest. Lightning slammed into the foreshore. The heavens opened up and forth another roar of thunder. The lights finally gave up the ghost and plunged Allman into inky blackness. He had already prepared for this eventuality, and he congratulated himself on his foresight. He was not a stupid man, and he assumed that people who lived in this town all their lives would at least be prepared for a major disaster. The fact that he lived on the seashore led him to believe that in the event of a major natural disaster, his lights would probably be knocked out. The room was lit for a second by a brief lightning strike before his hand touched the lantern he had acquired for just this type of situation. The flame flickered to life. The staccato beat of the raindrops on the roof doubled in tempo, sounding like the tribal drumming of some long-lost tribe. I like this guy's writing. Allman returned to his seat by the window that faced the bay, preparing to enjoy the natural light show. Another bright flash revealed something odd, and he squinted at the foreshore to get a better look.
You went out and
No, he squinted. He's up there.
Okay.
A second strike confirmed what he was seeing. The entire beach was moving. Once again, the storm illuminated the beach for a split second, and his jaw dropped at what he had seen. Crabs. Hundreds of thousands of crabs. Yucky. This was interesting and weird, but Allman was far too excited at the prospect of fresh crab meat to ponder the ramifications of his discovery for too long. Crab was expensive meat, and he was quite fond of the taste. Quickly, he covered the flame of the lantern, opening the vent so it could breathe, but not be put out by the falling rain, and tossed on his raincoat. He found the bag.
Get some crab?
Yeah, boy. He sound like a Trini out hunting crab, eh?
Yes.
He found the bag and shook it open as he smiled. It was big enough to hold a couple hundred crabs well. Allman watched the storm light up the beachfront again, and his eyes widened greedily as he saw the mass of crabs jostling for position near the surf. Papa. The storm set the hairs on his arms on end, and he could almost taste the electricity in the air. The strangeness of the situation dawned on him as his excitement abated and he hesitated. The shimmering light from his lantern danced erratically as little gusts of wind blew in through the vents. Then something happened. The crabs noticed him.
Oh, Jesus, scary.
And with single-minded purpose, the entire cast turned as one entity.
Oh my gosh.
With surprising speed, first 1, then 10, then 20, crabs started running towards him, their sideways cuddle almost funny to watch. Allman was too stunned to move, and the first one covered the distance to him like a sprinter. Then it leapt. Instinctively, Allman dodged, his mind doing cartwheels. Before he had a chance to think, another one leapt at him, its pincher cutting through his rain slicker and slicing his wrist painfully. Allman cried out, more in surprise than pain, and shook it off, but the crabs were far from done with him.
So he fall yet?
He dropped the lantern and ran, heading back to where he thought the cabin was. Lightning flashed, showing him that he was running for the edge of the hill, And, what was more terrifying, behind him the crabs had closed ranks and were now shepherding him towards the crashing surf. Shepherded him? He was a human, and these tiny things, he could crush them. He touched his wound and shuddered. There were more crabs than he had seen in his entire life, and he had nowhere to run. The smell of salt was overwhelming, and the seawater from the breaking waves splashed on his exposed face and through the slash in his raincoat. He stopped short of the hill and turned to face the oncoming swarm. They were crabs. Crabs had no problem with him. They would leave him alone. It wasn't like they consumed human flesh. They were vegetarians. The most he would have would be a couple clips before they lost interest. Lightning flashed just as the first crabs cuddled close to his ankle and stabbed him through his clothes, piercing the flesh like a fencer. He cursed just as it leapt off the ground and latched onto his nose, the sharp claw gripping like a vice. He cried out in pain and fury and swatted it away along with the tip of his nose. Looking down at the approaching wave, his blood ran cold. Their eyes hung on stalks and seemed to glow like the embers of a dying grate. He could feel malevolence, some primal force to maim, to kill, to spill blood, trapped inside their tiny primitive minds. As one body they converged on him, and his screams mingled with the crashing surf and the booming thunder until all was silent. 2 days later, a woman further along the coast reported finding Allman's upper torso. His head was attached by a thin length of flesh. They fetched the body out of the surf. "Looks like we have to put the cabin up for sale again," the sheriff said to the old man beside him. "Looks that way," Jones replied. "Certainly looks that way." Well, when Shanta and Tony were here, we had crab meat. I didn't think that I would be reading about crab tonight.
Eating you up instead.
I don't want to dream about these guys running me off.
Not a very good bedtime story.
Not a good bedtime story, but an interesting story. Well written.
Oh, very good, very good. Very graphic.
Very graphic, yes.
But I
Terrifying.
tell you, it's a little too scary for nighttime. I'd be dreaming crabs eating me up tonight.
That story was Running Night.
Well,
Crabs.
boy, I'd be running under the bed.
But Louise, I'll tell you no. I mean, in the Caucasus, you all used to go and catch crab on a dark night, eh?
I never went, no.
No, but you know, it was typical in Manzanilla, or Caucasus, or even Granville.
Yeah.
People talk about going, you know, and catching crab, taking it in your crocus bag, grabbing
You're
it,
lucky that
putting it into their crocus
You're
bag.
lucky that they didn't have all that crab, though, to deal with.
Yeah, I tell you. Anyway, the young man who wrote that, or whether it's an elderly man, I can't say.
You're Trinidad?
I don't know. I don't know. But folks, so maybe you could give us a little feedback on what we were talking about, having a little evening of reading sometime in January. Lyndon will be very happy himself to know this. So hope you enjoyed our little bedtime stories, scary and uncanny and weird as it was.
Uncanny. I look forward to a more soothing story.
Yes, and there are a couple of them. This is just one of 15 in this book here. So have a good night and try your best not to dream of crabs.
Can
tonight.
you, before I take that off, just let me see how this store looking?
Well, I tell you what, I it's kind of awkward to really look at that too. But let me see if I can get.
Let's take off the plastic.
Let's see now. I'll doctor it up, Louis. Don't worry, I'll doctor it up. So, my friends, all the best, and Louis, say good night.
Night, night, sleep well. After that scary story, I hope you all don't have a restless night.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.